is often referred to as world's largest democracy. And this assumption rests on the ideal that it's supposed to have a free media. Well, the RSF report has actually shone a light on this and found that the media in India has severely failed international indices of what constitutes free media. Its findings are important because not only do they flag that the world's largest democracy, the term so loosely used and it's always used, today finds itself at the bottom end of the table of 180 countries, and studied by the RSF, and its precipitous decline of 8 notches over last year. It could be because the methodology that Daniel was telling us about, but nevertheless, it is a very significant drop. And if you consider it over a longer span, the drop is even more severely apparent. In other words, we are facing an aggravated and cataclysmic decline in terms of media freedoms in this country that could point to a situation of no return. And so it is a dire situation we are facing today. There's an urgency, therefore, to understand the structural reasons for this decline. The section in the RSF report has attempted to do this, including and it has flagged tendencies towards concentration of ownership, the building of spectacular rapprochement between the ruling party and the big families dominating the media, achieved over the last 8 years of power of the Modi government. And it has also talked about the amplifiers, how the media, instead of being the watchdogs, have become amplifiers of the government narrative. And it has led to the creation of an ecosystem of vigilantes loyal to the ruling dispensation, which serves to intimidate and punish independent journalists and weaponize disinformation. So all this has come out in the words of my colleagues in this panel, and we need to unpack the structures, this coercive environment in which we are functioning in India today. I will, in the brief span given to me, deal with 2 disturbing and recent developments. The first is the deliberate use and systematic deployment of draconian laws to silence journalists. The manner in which Fahad Shah, editor-in-chief of Kashmir Wala, was actually following a very, very important story. It was about a family that had lost one of its young members in a falsely, a framed case. And so he was just putting across the views of this family. And that was enough to actually put him in jail. And the moment he was given bail, he was thrown in again under the PSA, which is, of course, which doesn't give you any bars of bail. You have to remain behind bars for years on end. And that's the situation we have in Kashmir today. And like Parunjoy and others have talked about, it's not just Kashmir. Kashmir, we know, has been lost because the media and the military have been used together as forces to subjugate this region. But I'm talking of UP, of course, figured very prominently in Barsha's comments and Niranjan's comments as well. UP is such a large and very politically important state that what happens in UP is very, very crucial to what happens in the country as a whole, because its impacts go beyond. It accounts, if UP was a country, it would have been the 5th largest country in the world. So you can imagine the impact that, the media in UP being completely suborned to the powers that be, the impact that has on the country at large. So it is, what I want to tell you here is, in just the last month, that is April, we had such a series of assaults that dramatically exposed the impunity with which the state, the police, private armies have treated journalists. In Madhya Pradesh, they actually stripped a whole lot of journalists, stripped them down to their underclothes. Why did they do this? They did it to actually ensure that they are shown to the world as people without any dignity. Their dignity was actually physically robbed from them. So this, I mean, the kind of modus operandi, it's so amazing that over the last few years, the modus operandi has changed in so many ways, but they have all one end, and that is to completely ensure that the independent voice of the journalist is shut out. I know that Basha talked about the Balya case, and I like the Balya case. You know why? Because they managed to get civil society, the local people there, to actually come out in support of these journalists, because these journalists were doing a very important job. They were talking about how school examination papers were, exposed much before the exams were held. And the journalists were very brave. They came out on the streets and defended their right to publish the story. And because of their courage, there was some attention that was paid to them. But as Basha did point out, there are so many whose voices will never be heard because they are so far away from the seats of power. At the same time, the work they are doing is so crucial. Like, for instance, take sand mining. Now, sand mining is a very localized thing, but it finishes off entire rivers. And people who do stories on sand mining live in terror of their lives, not just their lives, the lives of their families. And very often they are in very distant places, so they don't even have the kind of connections that journalists in Delhi may have. So we are talking about a very complex picture in a country as large as this. So apart from using existing law, draconian law, the Modi government has also introduced coercive orders designed to discipline independent journalism. The Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Ethics Code rules of 2021, introduced without public consultation, was one instance of this. Its specific intent was to regulate online news, because many of the portals, like speakers before me said, the mainstream that have completely sold out have actually, found irrelevance. And the people who have found relevance are actually digital players. NewsClick, for instance, is one instance. The Wire, the Scroll, there are so many. Scroll broke that wonderful story about, hunger in a constituency in UP. These are stories that need to be told. And because the digital space is relatively less requiring of big capital, it is possible for them to actually speak out in a way that these mainstream media cannot, because of the compact that their owners have already made with the government. So what you're seeing is not just economic and political power, you're seeing economic plus political plus media power. And that's the schema that we have to look at very carefully. So together with this intimidating legal landscape, there's a disturbing rise in the surveillance of journalists, including through the sophisticated software like Pegasus, which has been referred to earlier. And the Pegasus, we know, has a capacity to extract messages and information from phones. So journalist sources can, be actually betrayed through processes and software like this. So it's a very dangerous thing. And in fact, one way to live and work in the Pegasus era, people are told, is to leave your cell phone behind. Don't take it if you're going to meet important people, your sources, because you will never get away with this information. So the names of 40 Indian journalists, among a whole range of civil society actors, figured in the leaked list of potential targets for surveillance in the Pegasus list. And forensic, and we know that Paranjoy is a major valid member of that club. So I'm saying that it's become so normalized, the surveillance staring us in the face in plain sight. And what does the government do? It just does not acknowledge its responsibilities. It either keeps quiet, it denies that it has done anything, or it diverts. So it's such a serious issue that concerns Indian democracy at its roots is just not even attended to. It's just ignored by this government. And that is the danger that we are facing today, because when people who are meant to be accountable, people who say that they have the power of the people behind them, these are the very forces that are denuding Indian democracy of its power. The situation is indeed grim, which only underlines the importance of reports such as the one that Daniel and his group has just brought out. Thank you so much.